This is probably the cutest RTX 3000 card that you will ever see. The puppy version of Nvidia's steroid-powered Ampere lineup, the MSI RTX 3060 AERO ITX. So I just got this MSI 3060 miniature edition over here because I really need it for another video. And because it had to be exactly this one, I was forced to pay that tremendous price tag of double the MSRP. So before I cry myself to sleep because of the crippling debt this card put me in, I decided to give it its own video. This episode is brought to you by CDKoffers.com. CDKoffers offers a wide variety of software or game keys for a fraction of their usual retail price. You can get your usual PC game codes or even library codes for things like Steam, Uplay and Origin. But the most important part for us are the software codes. Here we can get software activation codes for things like MS Office or Windows 10 for a ridiculously cheap price. And right now you can also use the promo code tiniest to get a 20% discount to make the already cheap Windows 10 license even cheaper. If you want to get that nasty activation message away, make sure to head down to the links in the description below and don't forget to use the promo code TS20 for a 20% discount. So this video will most surely not be a buyer's guide, not until you can get at least 2 of these cards for a kidney, and it wouldn't make any sense to make like a performance comparison because, let's be honest, I'm way too late for that party. But this is one of the only 3 RTX 3000 cards, for now, that come with a single fan and are made for the ITX standard. And this makes it incredibly interesting for projects that require such ridiculously small cards, like the PC case I'm about to review. So today we will be focusing on something very different, because there are major drawbacks when you go with a card like this. In order to get to such a small size, the manufacturers have to give up on a third or even a second fan. And because of that, these cards are incredibly hard. So in order to compensate for that, what they do is just throttle the boost clock until it isn't a fire hazard anymore. Now, that is something that I do not approve of. So my quest for today is to do everything so that my iPod Shuffle sized 3060 here can perform like an actual 3060, even if it burns down my house. Unfortunately, I do not own a regular size 3060 to compare it to, but what I do have is an internet connection. So I used way too much of my time and watched way too many 3060 reviews and found that uncircumcised 3060s are boosting to slightly less than 2000 MHz, so that's our goal for today. But before I start playing with pure lava over here, I needed a baseline. So I ran Firmark for quite some time to know how cool or hard the card can run, and it settled at around 72 degrees C. That does not leave me with a lot of room, though I have to admit, even under full load, this thing is incredibly quiet. Then to top it all off, I also ran a 1080p Firmark and Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark. So generally, my tiny 3060 was able to boost to exactly 1837 MHz and settle at 72 degrees C. That's quite hot for a 3060, but we also need to cram another 150 MHz in here to have our full usable 3060, so let's light this on fire. My first approach was just to open up Afterburner and add 150 MHz on the core and a bit on the memory and just hope for the best. And yeah. Well, to be completely honest, I was expecting this card to completely thermal throttle as soon as I even touched those Afterburner sliders. But no, this dwarf of a card took it like a champ and was able to boost the core speed to the same level as any other 3060 review. And to make things even weirder, the temperature stayed exactly the same at 72 degrees C. Sure, that's way harder than any other 3060, but it performs the same. So, because this video would be way too short if I ended like this, I had to change my quest to how far can I push it before it lights on fire. And here it starts to get pretty funny. So I started off by slowly working my way up the overclocking ladder and finished up at plus 230 on the core and plus 600 on the memory. If I went up a single megahertz, the Firmark stress test would just freeze my PC and it's done. At these settings, the 3060 was able to push a maximum of 2055 MHz at 75 degrees C and 47 FPS in firmware. So that's already a pretty good improvement of about 11%. Then it was time for the Tomb Raider benchmark. And, yeah. To make things even weirder, the card is not like just unstable, but as soon as I started the game, the VRMs created that horrible cold white noise, and after a second, just boom. So initially I thought that I was unable to push more than 230 on the core because the card was just unstable. But as it turns out, based on that horrible sound, this is not a chip problem, this is a VRM problem. And with me being unable to give this poor little bastard more power than those sneaky people at MSI allow, the VRMs are just giving up. So unfortunately, I was doomed to slightly lower the specs to plus 200 and plus 500 to give those coils a bit of space, and I was able to perform the complete benchmark at 2032 MHz and 122 FPS at around 75 degrees C. And at this point I was forced to end my quest prematurely, but we have learned something quite interesting. With the MSI Aero 360 ITX, it is actually not the cooler that is crippling the card, it is the VRM. And even more than you might think, because no matter how far I pushed it, the fan on here was barely pushing more than 50% fan speed. And that is quite a sad thing, but after all, we were able to push the card high enough to compete with any other stock 360 with a normal VRM and way beefier cooler. And while doing all of this, we were able to stay at 75 degrees C and have a pretty quiet experience because, yeah, the card only has one fan and it was spinning at 50%. So after all, I'm still pretty happy with this thing and I can't wait to put it in that miniature PC case I already mentioned. But we have to end this rather pointless video. So yes, the card performs like any other stock 360, but not a single FPS more. So even if I didn't burn down my house, I hope you've enjoyed it, and maybe you can consider liking the video and subscribing to not miss that PC case review that I'm talking about, because it is really a really cool PC case. And hopefully see you in the next one.